Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a Soka researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy the conversation.
Hi, I'm Sandy Arntzen. I'm based here in Los Angeles, California. I'm an educator. I work primarily with children who have autism and or ADHD, and I've been working with kiddos from ages 3 all the way up to 21. So it's a big
Awesome.
span.
It is a great range, and like these young people, they have so much energy, and so many different passions, and navigating that. I mean, even within that like range, I'm sure like a 5-year-old is way different from a 8-year-old, which is way different from a 13-year-old. But I'm sure that you're able to like connect with them and have a good time while doing that, right?
Exactly, and I love that every single day is different. Right? Because
Mm,
every child presents or young adults, present with different strengths and different challenges, and it's my very special honor to meet them with where they're at and figure out,
mm.
"Okay, these are your strengths. How do we make you shine even bigger and brighter in these areas? And these are your challenges, so how do we now move through that? How do we evolve? How do we transform?" And then, yeah, how do we have that pivot point?
Yeah, and I love that you use the word like it's your honor, right? To be able to like hold that space with them, to be that presence in their life, to be to guide them, to support them in this way. I think we don't realize how important those kind of figures are in our own development, in our own upbringing,
Yes.
and for you to kind of like really put it out there and say like you really want to understand the person in front of you, to really yeah, value them in their full potential, right? Kind of bringing to light
Exactly.
who
And
they are,
mhm,
seeing their potential, right? I think is so
exactly.
important, and I'm really excited to have you on the podcast, for
Oh,
you
as you
to
should.
share. Of course, here we are. But hey, let me just kind of rewind a little bit because we got connected not too long ago at a really fun like event. It was like a Harvard function where a bunch of alumni came together at the Huntington Library in Pasadena, and yeah, and then we got to sit at the same table. And I realized, oh my gosh, you're a fellow educator as well who
Mhm.
studied at Hugsy,
Yep.
and so it was just like it was really
It's
fun to be able to like make that connection. I did talk a little bit about Fusion Academy, which was you were like, oh, that's really cool as well. So a lot of good like sharing back and forth, and then of course I was like, be on my podcast, please, and I want to hear more about your journey.
let's
So
see
you
if you're going to be okay after the hour, right?
well, no, Sandy, this is your space. So, feel comfortable sharing whatever you'd like. But, it is an invitation for you to kind of rewind the clock a little bit and speak to some
Mhm,
of the pivotal points in your own journey, maybe some of the, important figures in your life. But, if you can maybe share some of those milestones, I think it would really give us a better idea as far as why you
the
show
better
up to work and why
oh,
you would like to do the work that you do, right? So,
okay.
mhm,
So I'll just start off generally. I know that when I was in school, I always did better when I liked the teacher, right? I don't know about you, but if I liked the teacher, I was motivated to work harder, to put in more hours and really kind of face my struggles, right? Just kind of really figure out what isn't working for me here and how do I get to the next level because I really like this teacher. So, because of that, I know that when I'm showing up for my kiddos, for my clients, I am their number one cheerleader. I need to be somebody that they feel safe with. I need to be somebody that they feel comfortable with. I need to be someone who they feel connected to because all learning happens within the context of a relationship, which also includes academic learning, right? So when I was at Harvard, I went into um, some of the school districts working with young kids. And I remember I had to work on math with a student. And do you know those like little cubes where you use for math? My brain isn't accessing the words. Like if you're doing 3 plus 5, you get 3 little cubes and then 5 little cubes. Those like little cubes I'm talking about? You can stack them together, those plastic
I
ones.
mean,
You're
I can
saying no.
imagine which yeah,
Okay.
yeah, no, but
So anyway, so there was a math problem and he was getting these cubes, but he was not doing the math formula with the cubes. He was creating something else.
Mm,
And instead of being punitive, I approached him from a place of curiosity and I asked what he
mm,
was doing. And he told me he was making a coffin because his uncle had overdosed over the weekend. And then I was thinking, how am I supposed to sit here and teach him math if he's processing such trauma and he's such a young child? And then it was a moment of like, how do I step back and how do I show up as a human to this child first? And how do I let him have a moment where he can talk about what's happening for him? Right? This is a very extreme example, but all to say that with the learning, whenever I work with kids, I need to make sure that they're emotionally regulated so that I can then teach them the academics that they're struggling with. So a lot of times when I have kids who are coming to me, they might, they have some difficulty, they have some challenges at school. And for a lot of kids, sometimes that shows up as anxiety, shame, avoidance, eloping, all the different things, right? And so my first task is to always work on emotional regulation. And I always think back to when I was a kid. I always tried harder when I felt like I liked the teacher and there was a connection and that I was seen. And then, of course, through my education at Harvard, well, I went to UCLA before Harvard. I don't know if I could disappoint you that way, but at UCLA, a lot of my education was behavioral. So UCLA, I have a very behavioral background from UCLA, and then at Harvard, it was very relational. I even took a class called peer play. Oh gosh, what is it called? It was so long ago. Peer play modeling or something like that. And it was all about connection. So it would be two adults modeling a relationship with two kids, right? So that really landed for me. Is like, okay, if these kids are feeling connected and if there is also a role modeling as to how do we connect with each other? How do we show up? How do we ask for help? And how do we also receive help? So the way that I work is very relational. That was a very long-winded answer to a question. So
no, 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 not at all. Actually, what you're saying about, really liking the teacher and how that motivates you to learn yourself and, you know, kind of seeing that spark modeled in another person and naturally being attracted to that and wanting to kind of, you know, build upon that together. Um, you know, I've heard this phrase like you teach the way that you were taught, and I don't know if
mm,
that resonates, but
yeah.
from your recollection of like the teachers that you really connected with, that you really felt like they were your cheerleader, is there any teacher that like just immediately kind of pops into mind that you can maybe speak to? You don't have to put names,
Yes,
but
I had,
yeah,
had a
experience
teacher in
about
high
that?
school named Mr. Brady. I went to an all-girl high school in San Francisco, and my smallest class was 4, and I think my biggest class was maybe 12? So, talk about individual, learning, right? Kind of like fusion, but not because at least we were had more of a group. So Mr. Brady was like that. He just was this very grandfatherly figure. He was very kind, and he just made every lesson fun and interactive, and we participated well with him because all of our he just knew how to this is gonna sound so LA, but, he really knew how to he had a high vibe, and he knew how to draw that energy from us as well. So that has always been really fascinating to me. Like, how do I get this child from point A to point B? Like, where do I need to meet them emotionally? I need to hear what they're saying, and I also need to pay attention to what they're not saying, right? A lot of times it's what they're not saying that we really have to pay attention to. And I really do believe that all learning happens within the context of a relationship. Our relationships with our parents, for example, with our siblings, and even in romantic relationships. Hopefully, we go into romantic relationships to learn and to heal each other and just not mindlessly. But if you approach, your life and you look at your relationships as a place to learn, then that also kind of it puts you in a framework as to what is my responsibility here? How do I need to show up? And am I showing up in a way where there is progress? And I'm at the point in my career where I can meet a client for the first time and I know pretty well that I can be of service or that I cannot be of service
Mm,
because not every relationship is also going to work. And I also let people know that too. Like when they're out there, looking for speech therapists, occupational therapists, you name it, we don't always have to go after the big names. It's really just like you don't always have to go after the most popular boy in high school, right? You want to go towards the person that you feel safe with, the person who sees you, the person who's going to actually do the work with you. And you got to make sure that you pick the right partner.
mm. Yeah, there's a couple of things that really stood out from what you just shared. One of them was about, like you said, pay attention to what they are not saying. And I
Mhm,
think that, when you're like in like maybe like either like a therapist, kind of like looking at a client for the first time, meeting them for the first time, or as a teacher, observing like the dynamics within a classroom, there is something to say about like a younger professional,
mhm,
just not having the kind of experience to pick up on certain patterns, certain behaviors, certain things.
mhm,
And there's this fixation, right? I think a tendency to try to just like take things at face value and like make judgments off of that. But
mhm.
then there's this whole host of like behaviors that aren't popping up, right? Or that, are not being expressed, or kind of like pauses or silences that you're kind of like wondering what will come of that. And I feel like when you are further in your career and you're able to pick up on that, that actually speaks much louder than what is being like verbally said. So I think that all of that kind of comes down to like wisdom and like
Mhm.
discernment of like really getting to the essence of like what is the need, and what
Right.
is really at play here. And it's complex, right? Again, it takes years of practice and experience. So that was really, I think, very powerful because this teacher that you mentioned, Mr. Brady,
Mhm.
sounds like you said he had a grandfatherly figure. I'm sure he was more mature. Maybe
Yes.
he wasn't like actual grandpa age, but
I think he
nonetheless.
was. I
Oh, he
think
was.
I think he was. He definitely he also looked like a grandfather, like, everything about him,
Oh,
and he was just like, the sweetest man. I've never met
oh,
anyone as sweet and as caring and as thoughtful, as he was just amazing. I had a lot of great teachers, and I also had a lot of teachers that weren't so great, and I also learned a lot from the teachers who weren't so great either, right?
that's life. You got to have a lot of different teachers, right, to kind of show
Y
you the spectrum of what you like and what works and what you don't like and what doesn't work. Because
Yeah,
the second thing that really stood out to me from what you shared was that learning happens within the context of a relationship. And I
correct.
think,
Mhm,
like as a human being, right, we're kind of like wired to learn, right? Ever since, like when we're babies, like we're just absorbing, we're observing everything. But
mhm.
then we find ourselves embedded in so many different contexts, right? And I think that we kind of come up against so many other people as we go through this life, and we're like, I'm thinking of like we're like potatoes in like a knapsack or something, and we're all kind of like like you move the bag around and we're all like rubbing up against each other,
Yeah.
and sometimes it can be like a lot more like friction, and
Mhm.
in some ways actually that friction helps to clean the potatoes, right? Because they're kind of like coming out from
Oh,
the dirt
yeah,
and stuff. But
yeah.
like in a more like specific case, I do find that like if you're in a, I don't know, a situation where a boss is particularly, mean or has high standards, it's difficult to feel truly safe. And so then maybe like the learning process is kind of like hindered in that sense. And
Oh,
then,
yes.
but then, yeah. So I mean, I really see that clearly in like a classroom context, but then also even just in like adult relationships, even romantic relationships. Like,
Mhm.
how is it that you can like negotiate, like different personalities and different ways in which you feel safe, right? Because it sounds like that emotional regulation, like psychological safety, these things really go hand in hand together, and that's like the main thing that you first address, right? Before you
Yes.
can get to anything else, right?
Yes. I mean, I come from the school of thought that those need to be established so that the learning can happen.
Right.
I don't wanna create I want learning to be fun, I want it to feel enjoyable. There's enough people out there who will make learning not feel fun, as we know. There's enough people, right? Like the reality of, um, but so I wanna be kind of like a diamond in the rough, right? I wanna be somebody who makes learning feel fun and exciting, definitely not punitive, and there's gonna be times where it's not always going to be a dopamine hit and rush, I understand that as well, but to the best of my ability, especially when the kiddos are really young, I want it to feel more like play. One of the things
Mhm.
I do with, the kids who are able to have these kind of conversations, I start with, just like a check-in. Tell me a rose. What is something good that has happened within the past week? And then tell me a thorn. What is something that's happened that you didn't really like? It doesn't have to be some big dramatic, horrible thing. It could be something that just kind of felt annoying. And tell me a bud. What are you looking forward to? And because I do this every week, I also do it with the kids. So I am modeling it for them. Oh, my roses, I had lunch with my friend. My bud is I'm going to see my dad later today. My thorn is, my friend was sick last week. And just to model so they can also start sharing. And I've noticed that when I create that space before the session, it really just also helps them release whatever it is that they need to release so that we can get to work or for them to share any kind of happiness. So it really feels so that's something that I don't know if you wanna do, but
That's beautiful.
yeah.
I love that because I
Mhm.
I also really value check-ins, and that's what I would regularly do within my classroom as well. But
Yeah.
the imagery of a rose,
Mhm.
it's I mean, we think of it like in nature as like that's natural, right? That
Mhm.
like there's the beauty of the
Correct.
rose itself,
Mhm.
but there's the reality of like if you go to pick it up, you might grab the thorn and that hurts.
Mhm.
And but it doesn't necessarily diminish the actual beauty that is there. But then also you bring in the bud part of
Mhm.
it, which is like more future, like looking like at like oh what will come next, and yeah, and I just find that it's a very nifty kind of like um analogy, right, of like kind of what their life is like in this current moment. So I
Yes.
will definitely steal that and use
Yes.
that.
And it also
And I
just helps me understand when they're walking into the session what's alive and well for them. 'Cause usually
mm,
what they're sharing is alive and well for them. And
mhm,
and then it also gives us, like, a space to celebrate the roses, and it also gives us space to talk about the thorns, and then how do we problem solve? Like, kiddos will tell me about bullying situations, that will happen, and then we'll talk about different ways as to how they can respond to that, give them some tools for that. And then
mm.
what they're looking forward to, sometimes they think it has to be something really big. I'm like, no, it could be something as simple as my mom's gonna make me my favorite meal tonight. It doesn't have to be like I'm going on a trip. It's also kind of tweaking, like not everything has to be so big and grandiose. Cause I think here in LA, sometimes we and the kids and the adolescents here, everything feels like it needs to be big. Like the roses have to be like some big 5-star event that has happened. And I'll tell them, the rose can just be like, it's sunny outside. I like the weather. So just also looking for those moments of being happy as well. So I always like I'm always like planting these like different little seeds as to how they can start looking at their life and shifting what is important if you
Yeah,
call
and
it out.
and also, like, I think there's an element of, like, appreciation, right? And, like, recognizing that, you know, yeah, today, that rose is the fact that it's sunny outside, right?
Yeah.
Or that it is, like, that home-cooked meal that you really enjoy,
Oh my
and
gosh, so
I
let's
think
do it now. So Scott, what is your rose?
what is my rose?
Yes.
My rose is being able to finally connect with you and have this opportunity to learn more about your journey. No, really, honestly. I mean, I find that like this, even though it's very much a space that I want and I invite people to join on, I end up learning so much and get so inspired by people just kind of in very vulnerable ways sharing out like, yeah, this is kind of what makes me me and what makes me tick. So I find that to be very powerful, the connection piece. So
Okay,
that's my rose. And
good.
yeah. Oh, do I have to go through all of them?
Yes, you have to go through all of them. So what's your
I do.
thorn?
Okay. Oh, my thorn. I think my thorn, um, I feel, yeah, it's like a heavy one because there's like, I think, certain struggles of like kind of the anxiety of like keeping up with a lot of things, like day to day. And
Yeah.
I think I don't know, it's not, like, particularly, like, a sharp thorn. Maybe
Mhm.
it's like a dull thorn, but it's been,
Got it.
like, persistent, right? Where I'm trying to, I'm, like, wary of it, but I'm trying to do more to, like, mitigate my own kind of, like, overwhelm with a lot of things happening in the world, but then also even just day to day, gotta go to work
Oh,
and all
yes.
that stuff.
There
So
is a
it's a
lot.
tricky thorn. It's a tricky thorn,
It's a
but it's
tricky thorn.
there.
It's micro
Yeah.
and macro, right? It's
It is. Yeah.
yes,
And
okay.
then the bud, what I'm looking forward to, um, hmm, I am looking forward to I'm looking forward to so I'm part of a Buddhist community, and we have these, like, monthly meetings, and I'm really looking forward to our, like, community monthly meeting,
Okay.
because I kind of take it upon myself to do, like, skits, and I like to be, like, really creative with it. So it's, like, my,
Oh,
like, super creative outlet to do, like, a fun skit,
okay.
with some of the other youth in the community, so I'm looking forward to that, and I look forward to it every single month.
Oh, fun. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Thank
Okay.
you. What about you? What about you,
Okay,
Sandy?
let's
So,
see. So
yeah, what's your
my
rose?
rose is it was my birthday, and as you know, because I
Happy
am a Leo,
birthday.
I'm
Mhm.
very classically, annoyingly Leo in the sense that I celebrated my birthday all month. So
It's still going on. You
yes,
still
well,
got
I
this
mean,
week.
yesterday was like the final last like hurrah, hurrah. I went to a restaurant here called Morel at the Sanborn Hotel. So we had brunch there, and then we walked over to Shutters, and then we got dessert, and then early dinner. So I was with 3 of my girlfriends, so that was a
Oh,
lot of fun.
wonderful. Yeah, that sounds like
Exactly.
like, what's that? A bouquet of roses right there.
Exactly, a bouquet of roses. So a month of fun things, and I also went to a drag show in West Hollywood on this
Fun.
past Thursday. I know that was fun, and
This is
then
sounding like only roses.
I know,
Where's the thorn?
only roses, and then my boyfriend took me to Laguna Beach, I could speak English, and then I spent time with my dad, and then I had, like, little one-off, like, dinners with other friends too, so, yeah, so that's my rose.
Okay, sounds great.
I know, exactly. My thorn is, like, summer's ending. And there's still so
Well,
many things I wanted to do this summer that I gotta, like, figure out how to do it, but it's kinda hard because, as you know, a lot of my clients have started school already, so I'm kind of back in school mode. So
mm,
that's my thorn. I didn't get to do everything I wanted to do over summer, but that's okay. And my bud is I'm actually waiting for all my kiddos to get back into school fully. I'm excited to see what's going to happen this year and how they transform. I'm excited to meet their new teachers and any other specialists that will be joining the team. So that part's always, it feels, I'll be honest, sometimes overwhelming because it
mm.
could be a lot of phone calls in a day. It could be a lot of clients in a day. So it can be overwhelming. Sometimes I have to be really good and mindful as to spacing out my commitments. But I am looking forward to it. So that's
I
my
thought you were
bud.
gonna say that I thought you were gonna say your bud was, next summer. You're like, "The
Oh,
thorn is summer's ending, the bud, next summer."
hey, trust me, I thought that. I thought that. See, you get me. You get me.
Yeah, I'm getting there, I'm getting there. Yeah, so I do wanna, like, learn more about, the clients that you serve and, like, how you further connect with them and maybe, like, some great stories of, like, maybe, like, challenge of, like, connecting and then kind of, like, how you kind of overcame that. But before we get into that, I actually
Yeah.
kind of wanna, like, rewind the clock a little bit more because 'cause
Yes.
I'd love for you to share a little bit more about, like, you
Oh
mentioned
my
about, like,
god.
growing up in, like, San Francisco and, like, a small school, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your parents, if that's okay. I mean, like, how
Yes.
were
Okay.
they,
So
like,
it's a
in terms of, like,
I come from
upbringing?
a very complicated family.
Okay.
It's
We're
very
off to a good start.
yes, it's very complex. I grew up I was born here in Upland, California, and then moved to San Francisco at a very young age. I think I was like 3 or 4 years old. And so I consider San Francisco my childhood home, and I consider Los Angeles my home. I've been here, gosh, since I was 18 years old, and I'm 53 now. So yeah, I know. So LA is my home. And yeah, so complicated family story is what I will say. I'm not going to say too much more just out of respect because I don't know how other members in the family will feel. Um, but this is gonna drive you wild. So I was my mother's first child, and I sh I don't even know how to say this because it's so wacky. So she actually transferred me to multiple schools, I think over 10 schools before 8th grade. Like, I would go to a school and there would be something about the school she didn't like, and she would pull me from that school, and then she'd put me into a different school. So my foundational education was very jarred because I was being transferred from school to school to school. And so when I would land at a school, I wouldn't even attempt to make friends because I didn't even know how long I was going to be there for. Right. And then finally, they found a school, and I'm not going to say its name, and they settled me in there for a while. It's a Catholic school. I was there from fourth grade to seventh grade. And in seventh grade, one day, the teacher stood in front of the classroom and he proceeded to say that Asians needed to stay with Asians. Yeah, you can tell where the conversation was going to go. Whites need to stay with whites. And as you know, my mother is Taiwanese and my father is of Norwegian descent, Sandra Arntzen. Um, and he proceeded to go down that line of conversation, which I was having an issue with. Growing up, all my parents' friends, they were all interracial, so all my friends were mixed, and we all looked alike too, which was kind of funny. So we would pretend that we were all siblings. And so I raised my hand and I spoke back and I said that was not the case, because if that is wrong, then that means I am wrong and I am not wrong. It is not wrong for me to be here. And he told me to be quiet, which is not great. Um, and then I remember asking him if he was going to continue talking like that, and he said yes. And so I told him that I was going to wait in the hallway until he was done. And I took my chair and sat in the hallway. And I went home and I told my parents what happened, and they pulled me out of that school. So when they pulled me out of that school, it made sense to me. But all the other ones, I'm like, what is happening? You know? All to say that I ended up at a school called Convent of the Sacred Heart in San Francisco. And there are a ton of them. They have it in New Orleans, New York. My mother went to the one in Taiwan. And so when I went there, it was a small school, and they said that in order for me to join, that I would have to start therapy because all the other girls had been together since kindergarten. So they wanted me to have the emotional support to join an ongoing group of girls. And they knew why I was being transferred there. So that's also why they made the exception. So I went to convent for 8th grade and then all through high school. So when I was in convent, because the classes were so small, they were able to give me they were able to fill in all the gaps for me. And that's why it was great that some of the classes were 4 people, you know? So when I first started convent, they had like 3 levels of classes, and I'm just gonna be very kind of blunt and crass about it. They had like the average, right? This is like the main road, and then they had the honors, and then the group where, okay, we need a little bit of help here. So when I started convent, I started with that group. Like, okay, I need a little bit more help. But by the time I was a senior, I was taking all the AP classes and everything. So individualized learning and all of that, I'm a big, big support of. That's obviously something you don't know about me. So that's why I've always been curious about fusion, right? Because you're giving the one-on-one support, the one-on-one teaching, and it definitely helped and benefited me. Not that I went to fusion, but I went to a very small structured all girls school. So that was probably way too much information. So all to say, I went through quite. I had a very interesting relationship to education myself.
Yeah, and, well, first off, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it's never, like, way too much. It's whatever you felt comfortable sharing, and, it's clear from what you shared that there were a lot of disruptions, at, really, big kind of developmental periods of your life where, like, in schooling, moving 10 times, and then having these interactions with teachers where you're faced with discrimination. I love that, you had this, like, spirit of justice to be like, "That's wrong, and,
Mhm.
I'm standing up to you." And then your parents, I think really, like, through their actions showed how, like, they were on your side, right? Because they were like, "Yeah, that's not we're not gonna tolerate that either."
Mhm.
And ultimately, you found the right school, the right fit, and had a great experience as a result of that. I'm curious because you did mention the biracial, or interracial racial kind of, like, kids running around, and you were one of them.
Yeah.
And I actually have this experience myself, being that
Mhm.
my mom is, Korean, and
Mhm.
then my dad is Caucasian, white,
Yeah.
and yeah, and that people, they kind of do look at you a little bit differently, right? Um, and and I think it all comes down to identity and kind of what cultural milieu you were raised in. And
Mhm.
I always kind of thought of it as, like, almost like a there's, like, a little arrow, like a ticker that kind of, like, goes in one direction. I always felt like, oh, mine always pointed more towards, like, the white side.
Okay.
But it was always kind of, still, going towards, like, I would have, like, gatherings with, family, on my mom's side, and but, like, it was clear that, like, growing up in California, there was, like, maybe, like, a heavier presence, right, in terms of, like, surfer, SoCal, like, white surfer culture, yeah, kinda thing,
Yeah.
and then we're speaking English, but I'm curious, like, what was that experience like for you growing up biracial? And does it, like, in terms of identity formation, does any of that kind of, like, resonate with, the name of this podcast is Global Citizenship. Is there any intersection that you can maybe, like, make with that in terms of that particular dimension?
Well, I can start talking. We can continue our dialogue. But
Yeah, totally.
I remember my mom would always say that she always wanted to marry a white man because she purposely wanted to have kids who were mixed because she said that she thought mixed kids were the most beautiful, right? So from that perspective, I'm like, okay, score, right?
You did it.
My mom thinks that I am beautiful. So like she purposely did this. And then of course as an adult, I'm like, this is not why we pick a partner, right? There should be a little bit more. Anyways, okay, let me calm down. Um, so my parents, they were really great, and I think they did a really good job instilling that all parts of me are amazing and all parts of me are good. And the Caucasian, the Norwegian part, as well as the Taiwanese, like it's all good, and to be all celebrated. Um, I was very close to my mother's mother, my grandmother. So I would say I had a heavier, maybe Asian cultural upbringing, a little bit more traditionally slanted that way. Because my mother's side of the family had more of a presence than my father's. Um, I do remember being teased by kids for being half Chinese. They would make fun of the food that I would bring, or, they would hold their eyes up and, do things like that. I mean, I'm much older than you. So I also grew up in a time where even though it was San Francisco, I think there was a little bit more of lack of, mm, understanding, appreciation, and tolerance, fill in the blank, whichever word you think belongs there. So I think felt it in that I felt it I felt it more, I think, when I was that was also at that Catholic school. Not a surprise, right? Um, but, like, outside, being out in the world, I didn't really feel it, but some of my classmates, did, tease me. And then I also had the opposite thing where it was like, "You're so different looking than what I usually see," almost like fetishized, both by, Asian men, because I was like the Asian men who wanted to be with a white girl, but really couldn't be with a white girl because they needed to be with an Asian woman. Like, "Okay, I can go out with Sandy," right? Because she's both. You can't say no to this, right? And then the same thing with so it's been interesting, so to
Mm.
have all these different kinds of, reactions and just kind of paying attention to what that is. Especially being like a teenager and early adult, and then just being a woman as to how sometimes that, comes up. Does that happen? I'm sure that happens on your side too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So
Yeah.
I was born and raised in Southern California in Torrance,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of mixed race kids running around like me too. And but yeah, I felt similar, kind of like, oh, you're different. Like there would be these kind of like microaggressions where sometimes it would be kind of like meant as like a compliment, but it still kind of fractures your own sense of like you're not like pure, you're not like one entity itself,
Yes.
which raises question marks about like why does it have to be thought of in that way.
Mhm.
And again, like for me, it was always like it's almost like a tug of war. Maybe actually that's a better analogy of like which side is pulling harder, and then you're more aligned with maybe. Whereas now I don't see it as a tug of war at all. It's nothing close to that. It's more of like how you can just really embrace all sides of it.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that um, the perceptions of other people, like that, I don't have any influence over that. People are going to say what they're going to say.
Correct.
What I did notice is like when I started to travel, because I've lived abroad in a couple different places, primarily Brazil.
Mhm.
I started to find people um, like the way people perceive you in other places is just like vastly different, right? Than like here in like Southern California, like LA area, because they have like these kind of certain like buckets that they pull from, like Hapa, right? Mixed, like half white, half Asian,
Yes.
and but then
Okay.
I go to Brazil and they're just like, oh yeah, everyone's mixed, like
Yeah.
big whoop, like
Mhm.
join the club. And there's like this kind of more overarching identity as like, yeah, you're just Brazilian. I mean, yeah, like they do have like a lot of like a large Japanese immigrant population, and like third, fourth, fifth generation Japanese.
Mhm.
But in terms of like when I was there, they just kind of were like, oh yeah, you could be Brazilian, right? and
Yeah.
and I thought that
Well,
was really fun. Yeah.
yes, because I would say, like, you and we also look ethnically ambiguous too,
Yeah, right? They
right?
don't really can't put their finger on you and like, "I don't know." So, we'll just say
Exactly.
you're Brazilian? But
Ex
that's the kind of like these like wider, identities or like more expansive identities. It's kind of like I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on, because when I think about global citizenship, it is coming from like a place of more expansive identity.
Mhm.
But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. It does not have to come from like the racial perspective either, in terms of like mixed identity, but even in the work that you do, or like what you've picked up as an educator. But is global citizenship something that you have like, thought about, used as part of, your own vocabulary, or like what is your how does it even like,
You are
kind
the
of
first
register?
person I've ever heard that phrase from.
Oh, this is exciting. So I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just curious to hear, like, how do you even unpack something like that? Like,
Um,
what do you think it means?
what do I think it means? I think
Yeah.
it just means how do I show up in this world? And how do I contribute to this world? So when clients
Okay.
call me, I would say 99% of the time, I always say, how can I be of support? So the way that I would like to show up in the world, and I hope I do, and I know there are times where I slip because I'm human. I like to show up in the world, to be of support. Okay, not to sound corny or cheesy or any of that. The work that I do, I really do think it is why I'm here on this planet. I really do think this is what I'm supposed to do. I can't imagine doing anything else. Anything else just does not seem interesting to me. The way that working with kids and teaching them, whether it's academics or giving them some tools so that they can self regulate, so that they can co regulate, so that they can feel good and proud of themselves. I think that's why I'm here. I think that's my purpose.
I
Um,
love that.
but just in general, I think I'm supposed to, and I want to, like we all, there's a ticking clock for all of us. Not to sound morbid, but here I go. But there is a ticking clock for all of us, and we don't know when that's going to be. So, with the time that I have here, I don't want to cause harm. I don't want to cause distress. I want to be somebody who has brought some kindness, some goodness. And I do think it's because, I have had some traumatic things happen to me in my life. So I do understand what pain feels like. I understand what violence feels like. I understand what rage and unpredictability feels like and looks like. Um, and so I know that does exist in the world. And so I know the exact opposite exists in the world. So I like to be what the exact opposite of what that is. So if I can move about this world and, you know, I can't help everybody, and that's not my goal, but the people who do cross my path, and there are some kids who come into my life and I know on a spiritual level that I'm supposed to be working with them. Like there was like a bigger calling as to why they have appeared in my life. And for years I would kind of do a little prayer and I would say, please send me the families who I can best support, please. And I swear to you, like just even having that little mantra, I have had clients who have come to me who we are in alignment with. Because I think I'm also a special breed too. So the clients I have also have to be, we have to be in alignment. I remember I had a referral from one of my clients and she's like, I want you to work with my friend and her sons. And so this woman called me up. I'll just call her Jill. So Jill called me up and I said, let's just meet for, coffee, tea, juice, whatever. And as we were talking, she was talking about her three kids. And out of nowhere, I said this to her, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is not what I learned at UCLA. It's not what I learned at Harvard. But I said to her, being a parent, in my perspective, is probably the most spiritual path that you can take. Because in order to show up for your child, there are moments in your life and periods of your life where you have to be selfless and you have to look at your child and show up for them in a way that they need for their growth, right? There is, and I think that's very spiritual. And I said, and as soon as I said that, I also had thought of like, "Oh, no, I'm not supposed to say that. That's so woo-woo," right? And she immediately said, "Can we please work together?" And I was like, "Okay, got it." Like, we speak the same languages, and, like, I don't know if you can see, but I have this, like, feather tattoo,
Yeah, I see it.
and so, s so I have this tattoo, and a feather, it symbolizes that everything should be light as a feather, right? And so sometimes
Mhm.
my kids who carry really heavy stuff, like, I show them my tattoo, and we talk about feathers and how they're supposed to be light, and one of my clients is so funny, she said, "All your tattoos should be tax deductible," right?
Oh,
Like,
man.
I'm glad
The
my
kids
tattoos are
well, it evoked a reaction, that's good, talking point, but then
it
also,
did.
like, kids say the darnest things, right? You're like,
Yeah,
"I wouldn't have thought of that." But,
exactly.
I do want to, like, kind of, just kind of, you know, summarize a little bit of what you shared because I think there's a lot of really there was some gold that you shared about, why you do the work that you're doing,
Mhm,
and also a little bit of like grappling with global citizenship. What does that even mean? And I just want to do good. I want to contribute, and
mhm,
from what you shared, it's very clear that you have a really big heart for people who may be struggling, people who you see that you can actually like support, and you see their potential and you want to bring that out to have that shine even more brightly than it already is,
mhm,
and to be of service to others, I think is so needed in the world where everything really kind of just feels transactional. And even that conversation that you had where you
mhm.
kind of you know just you said out loud, you said the quiet thing out loud, right?
Yes,
But
exactly.
actually that was you being authentic, and that was you being able to make that connection in a way that for a lot of people, like they would have been either too like scared to say,
Mhm,
nervous or hesitant,
mhm,
or it just would have come across totally wrong. And I think, if we're able to be our true selves and show up as our true selves, people
mhm.
really pick up on that, right? Because
Yeah,
I think we're all very spiritual beings, whether we say it or not, or whether we show it or able to show it or not. That's not the point. But there is some kind of level where when you get deeper into it, like when you connect, you feel that, and it causes, it spurs people to action. So for you to have found your mission in this life, which
mhm,
the way you described it did not sound cheesy whatsoever, that you were put on this earth for that reason.
okay,
I think that a lot of most people can't say a statement like that, which is terrible.
yeah,
And so to be able to like say that with such confidence and like warmth and like heart, I think is, yeah, just so beautiful because it's not even like a vocation at that point. It's like a deep mission, a purpose that only you can fulfill. So, I think the way that you speak about the clients that you serve, and the, like genuine hope that you have, not only for that particular young person, but their family, right? Right. The people that are supporting them behind the scenes, it's all part of it's all part of the context, right? Of the
sure.
relationship that you were saying is so fundamental to what you do. Um, so, this is we're getting to some really good stuff. But actually, this is nothing compared to what I'm going to ask you now, because we are getting towards the end of our conversation,
We are
and
getting
you
towards the end.
promised me a story about Labubu.
I did
So
promise you a story
yeah,
about a
my
Labubu because I showed it to you.
you did. You showed me 2 of them. So, first, well, so my question, there's 2 questions, right?
I
So the
have 2
first question,
Labubus, yes.
well, no, wasn't that question. The question, it's like a follow-up because 1, it's about a recommendation. So normally I do book recommendation, movie recommendation, but this time we can do a Labubu recommendation.
Yeah,
So what is a
we're gonna
Labubu?
change the script, right? We're not gonna give
Yes.
the Leo the same questions, right? I'm kidding.
No, no, we won't do that. So, yeah, tell me, what is a Labubu? And then also,
Okay,
what is the story that you said you would share about it?
okay. Well, this is what I know about Labubus. All I know is that there are these little toys that I'm showing you right now, only you can see
Yeah,
it,
it's a
right?
little creature. It's
It's a
got a
little
face and a
creature,
smile.
it's, soft and fluffy, and they made a lot of money. Like, I think over $1 billion. It's, like,
It's
insane.
in China though, right? Isn't that where
I
it came
think so,
from?
yes. I think it's from a company called Pop Mart. Anyways, so as you can see, I bought this Labubu for myself, at Sawtell, and one of my kiddos gave me this love Labubu, and it was a really cute story. So, I've worked with his sister, oh my gosh, I wanna say for 6 years. And I worked with him for a little bit, and then I stopped working with him, and the family said, "Okay, you gotta work with him again," because when I stopped, he regressed a little bit. And so they said, "Clearly, we need you back in his life." And I said, "And here I am. So we're doing this." And we have a really fun, playful relationship. So he has a dozen of these Labubus, and he put it on his tennis racket. So it's hanging from those strings. So when you hold up the tennis racket, you see all these Labubus kind of swaying, right? It's really cool. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I like the pink one because the pink one is my favorite color." And he said something along the lines of like, "Of course you like the pink one. It's love, and I love you, Sandy. You can have it."
That's so cute.
It was so cute. Yeah. And I said, "Are you sure? Because this is yours." And he was
Wait, how old
insistent.
is this kid?
He's he just started 4th grade. He
Oh
just
my
started
god, he's a
4th grade.
4th
Yeah.
grader. Such a
Yes.
sweetheart.
He's
Oh,
so sweet. And then he's like, "Of course." So this is apparently they all have, I guess a feeling, right? So this one's love, and then there's another one that I like, and that one's hope, right? And I'm like, "Oh, I
mm.
like hope too."
Maybe you'll get hope.
Maybe. Well, he's gonna get 14 more Labubus, and I
Uh,
jokingly said, "Oh, are you gonna have a Labubu Christmas tree? Because this family celebrates Christmas." And his eyes lit up because he wanted, instead of having Elf on the Shelf, he wanted to have a Labubu on the shelf for this year, and his parents agreed. And just because of all the Labubus that he has, I just assumed it was going to be a Labubu Christmas. So now that's what he wants to do. He wants to decorate his Christmas tree with Labubu. So
wow. This just shows the big influence an educator can have on another person's life. Next thing you know,
well,
Christmas is now
I
Labubu miss.
know.
I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly, right?
Yeah, but
Exactly.
thank you for sharing that cute story because again, it's like, for someone to like kind of like welcome you into their world, and so for this fourth grader, right, the world of like Labubu. I'm sure there's a lot of other interesting, weird, quirky stuff. That I mean, like fourth grade mind is all over the place, which is beautiful. But like
Yeah,
for them to like feel comfortable enough to welcome you into that space, and then to kind of bounce ideas off of to the point where now you're having like a Labubu Christmas tree. I mean, like the way that his eyes lit up, and I see it so vividly. And like I've had this also where you would say one thing and that sparks one idea, or it sparks a certain reaction, and like that kind of like electricity is yeah, it's like so powerful, right? You want to see that happen in every single session, right? Or in every single class or whatever interaction you have. Um,
yes.
but we often find that standard interactions in the world kind of devoid of that. And so, it definitely is apparent that like the work that you do is to kind of bring that, excitement, curiosity, all of the powerful emotions to the fore because that's really what gets people, excited about living. And like, shouldn't we all be doing that, right?
Exactly.
Doesn't have to be Labubu, although I'm sure you could make a compelling argument why get a Labubu and it'll change your life, right?
Oh gosh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, okay, no, maybe
But
a little too
maybe.
much.
But maybe if we had some glitter and sparkle, we could.
Ooh, fun. Well, I think, with that recommendation, to have a Labubu in your life, I just really wanted to kind of like, yeah, just end by thanking you. Thank you so much, Sandy, for sharing this space, sharing a little bit about your own background, why you're so passionate about supporting, fostering, cultivating young people, and bringing out their full potential. It's very evident just even by like the tone of your voice that you get very excited about talking about your clients and your hope and your love for them, what they can achieve. So, yeah, and then also thank you for just grappling with like what being a global citizen means like for you. I think being a person of like like the kind of like contributive spirit who has a deeper purpose and wants to do good in the world is a great articulation for someone who just started thinking about it as soon as I asked them the question. So I wanted to give the last word to you. Any final thought or like send off? It could be very short, whatever you'd like to share as we kind of wrap up our conversation.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think just be happy. Just keep looking for the buds in your life and keep looking at the roses too.